Hi everybody, Steve Farmer here with Week 6 coverage of the match between the Arizona Scorpions and the St. Louis Archbishops. St. Louis gained a very important victory over the Scorpions this week and put the Scorpions down in the cellar in last place for the Pacific Division. But all hopes are not lost because there is such a tight packing between second and fourth place that with a little help from other teams, the Scorpions could climb into the playoffs, though it does seem doubtful at this point. Though the Scorpions failed to win this match, we must look at failure as an event and not a person. I do want to try and get through these games fairly quickly because I do have other things to do, and my heart's not really in it with as badly as they lost, but we do have a couple of very interesting games to look at. But first, we're going to look at the matchup between Grandmaster-elect Mackenzie Molnar. He's rated 25-12, and I think that's a low rating for him, to be honest. And he's playing Grandmaster Varujan Akobian, who's rated 27-17. So Akobian is the odds-on favorite with this, and we're going to go through the opening very quickly here. We'll see a Queen's Indian, and a rather rare continuation of taking on D2. And playing d6. And now Mac plays a rather odd move, novelty. He plays Queen a4. It's perfectly playable. b4 is probably a little more testing though. I will have the games posted for the PGN below the video here in chess.com, so be sure to check out the blog there. And when I post this on Chess Videos TV, I'll put a link to that blog as well. So let's continue on here. It's not a real exciting game. Very typical breakthrough for white to play c5 and such structures. And the trade of bishops. And we can see that already this is petering out to be a draw, pretty much. There was one comment here in the chat room that they thought that taking on b6 might lead to an advantage for white, but it doesn't really. So Mac played queen to d3. But if he did take on b6, here's what would happen. There's an in-between move, g5. Forces the horse away, and now queen takes e2. And black is clearly better after this. The pawn on a5 cannot be taken by white for tactical reasons, and because of that, black is better. But in the game, Mac played queen to d3, and after queen to b7, they repeated moves. And at move 23, yet another short draw on board 1. Now I can blame neither player for taking a draw here because it would take a pretty serious mistake from one side or the other to get any decent advantage out of this position. So a draw seems logical. Let's go on to the next board. And here we have International Master Pridhat Harshan Ganaphan. He's rated 25-08 playing white, and he's playing Mark Ginsburg as the black pieces. And we're going to go through this rather quickly too in the opening phase because the interesting stuff happens later on. It's a Najdorf. Knight a5 is kind of an odd bird, but it seems logical to trade off that bishop on b3. Knight h2 is a novelty. I've seen knight to d2 played before in this position where it goes to f1 to e3. But Priya has a different idea in mind here. And after queen to c6, he plays knight to g4. I still think knight f1 to e3 is the better idea for white, but he goes here. And now rook fc8. The whole battle in this opening is over the d5 square, really. If white can land a piece on d5 and not have to recapture with a pawn, he should have a good advantage. The trade-off for this for black is that he has the bishop pair. And if he can use tactical means to threaten a pawn on c2, preventing the knight from landing on d4, he should hold equality, as we see here. Bishop e3 was played, b5, a rather enterprising move by Mark. Now the idea behind this is if queen takes b5, well, then we get the pawn on c2 in return. Now if he captures on d6, we can take on g4. And this just leads to an equal position here. So in that regards, b5 is a very interesting idea. Now rook ac1 pretty much has to be played if he's not going to take. And now Mark continues with his ambitious plan of playing a5. I think I would have probably played a6, but this is good. g5. White could have taken on b5 right away if he'd wished. And now he takes on b5. And now a4. I was absolutely amazed that Mark went down this road, because it was very unclear. Rook to a6, let's go back. Rook a6 or rook to c6, either one should be good enough to hold the equality here. But I think Mark was probably watching Ravi's board and feeling that was too much up in the air and decided to press a little harder. Now, I think that Mark is not going too far out on the limb here, but he is going to end up giving White two passed pawns on the queen side. One way that can happen is after knight takes d6 right away, bishop takes, and then we get this. He's got two passed pawns, but they're doubled. And actually, he can get one of them back. So just one passed pawn. It should be a very easy draw for black here. But I really think that if White plays properly, that's the best black can hope for here, is a draw. So he played a4, trying to mix things up. b4, rook takes a4, knight takes d6. Now he goes about this in a different way, so he has two connected passed pawns on the queen side. Rook to c6, knight f5, bishop to f6, it's hit, has to move, and rook to d6. And I remember being fairly impressed with Priya's play here. He works as hard as he can to try and get those pawns up the board. Rook c7, knight to g3, g4, b3, rook to a8, c4, rook to b7. I think he plays rook to c3 here. I think rook to b6 is a little more straightforward. Rook c3, rook checks, king h2. Now, one would look at this position and say, you know, the pawns on b3 and c4 look like they give White a very clear win. But it's not so clear, not at all. The bishop pair, and we have to remember that Bobby Fischer once said that winning a bishop for a knight is like winning the minor exchange. And we're going to get to see some positions here where that's very true. And the bishops and active rooks, and if the king can get over to the center, black has very good drawing chances. However, I don't think he has more than drawing chances. But as we'll see, Mark tries for more in this game. Now, if I was playing black here, I'd play rook to b1. Get the active behind the passed pawn. Whether you have a passed pawn or you're fighting against the passed pawn, you want to get behind it, not in front of it. If that were the case, then let's take a quick look at rook to b1. Rook to b6 trade, and this just looks dead level, believe it or not. Black can play like bishop to e7, and if c5, then the pawn on b3 is hanging. If the pawn on b3 moves, then it just drops. So, believe it or not, I think black can hold that. Mark plays g6, and now I think White could probably try and press things with an immediate c5 here. Just say, okay, we're going to give you that pawn on b3, but you're going to have to trade a rook for it, and I'm going to have my rook behind the passed pawn. So c5 seemed like the sharpest move. But he plays rook to b6 here, and Mark declines the trade. He plays rook to d7. Let's go back. If he'd played rook takes b6, I think he can still draw. And I'm going to show you why the bishop over a knight is like having the minor exchange. Alright, so now bishop takes the rook, rook to b1. And if he wants to advance that pawn, he has to protect it in some way, so he goes bishop c5. Now bishop to g5 is a very nice move. And I would highly recommend writing down this position and having some fun with it, play around with it, because these two pawns on the queen side are really going nowhere. For example, if bishop to d6 here, then simply f6. And here's the point. If b4 is played, then bishop to d2 hits the rook has to move, and then we can take on b4, winning the pawn. Then the king will slide over to f7 to e8 and be there in time to stop the advance of the c pawn, the last remaining pawn. And of course, if he plays c5 right away, the b3 pawn just falls off the board immediately. The other thing is that the knight on g3 has no way to stop the bishop from coming to d2, so this nullifies the possibility of playing b4. So white is pretty much relegated to moves that really don't do a whole lot for his position, such as rook to d3, king f7, and like I said, I think this is a very good position to jot down and play around with, because I think you'll be surprised that these pawns are not easy to get up the board with the bishop pair and active rook fighting against them. So I just wanted to point that out. Back in the game though, rook to d7 was played. And again, I think Mark was trying for more because I think he felt that board 3 was not looking good for Arizona. So he was trying to get a win here. Rook to b8 check was played. And now, again, he could play for the draw, but that's not what he was going for. If he was going for the draw, he could play rook to d8 here. And after the trade, a couple choices. If knight to e2, then we get rook to b1, knight to c1, and then f5. This is rather unclear, but I think that black can still hold here. And if bishop to c5, then we would have rook to a2, hitting the pawn on f2, b4, f5, ef5, gf5, b5, king f7. I take that back. He's not really hitting the pawn on f2. He's just tying the bishop on c5 down to it. Black's got a good amount of activity here, and I think black can hold this. So, a very interesting position to look at. And you think, my God, these pawns are just going to be absolutely winning for white. It's just not quite easy enough for him to advance them. Back in the game, Mark played king to g7, and after c5, he played rook to c7, and this is possibly the losing move of the game. Again, rook to d8, rook takes, bishop takes, b4, f5, and things are far from clear. I think black is getting some serious counterplay. White probably will be able to advance the pawns a bit, but I'm not sure he's going to be able to promote them. So, fun position to look at. Unfortunately, we don't have the time in this video to cover everything. So rook to c7 was played, and now b4. It's getting them moved up bit by bit. Bishop to e7 and b5. Now, Mark realizes that if c6 comes in, he might as well resign on the spot. So he goes after mate. Now, the computers would consider this next move to be an error, and they would suggest something like rook to b1, but after knight e2, f5, c6, rook c8, trade, bishop c5, bishop d8, c7, bishop g5, b6. White is winning here anyhow. So with that in mind, Mark tries to go for something a little sneaky here. Rook to d7. After c6, he plays rook d to d1, going for mate. c7, and now f5. Now black is quite lost, to be sure, unless white is careless. And this often happens. You know, he's playing for a cheapo, basically. And if white does get careless, the tables could turn immediately. White played rook to c6, and now f4, just leaving that bishop hanging. He takes it, and now bishop h4. And black is just one move away from getting his dream. If he could play f takes g3 or bishop takes g3, he would have rook to h1, mate. I'm going to flip the board for a moment and let you ponder this position. It's white to move. What would you play here if you were white? Pause the video and come up with you'll need a plan, actually. You need a plan of a few moves here for white in order to pull off the victory. It's not really that difficult, but it is a little bit tricky. So go ahead and pause it and see what you can come up with here. Okay, let me flip the board back around again because we're covering this for the Scorpions. What did you come up with? Did you say promote? Well, that's absolutely the wrong move to play because a bishop takes on g3, pawn takes, and then mate. So that's the cheapo that black was after. But instead of promoting, what you need to play, well, actually there's a few moves, but the flashiest and the most accurate in my opinion is what was played by Priya. He played rook to g8 check. Very nice. So if the rook is taken, he can promote with check and continue on with a mating attack. For example, he just promotes and wins easily. And if black now goes to h7, well, he has to go about it a little differently, a little bit of chasing around. And the point here now is if king takes g8, this is mate, so king to h6 has to be tried. Now we got rook h8 check, king goes up here, we take this pawn with check, king goes here, and now again, another nice move here, rook to e6 check. And the point is if he takes the rook on there, this is promoting with check and winning easily. And if king to g7, we have bishop d4 check. And the point is if he takes the rook, now we can promote because we have demolished that mating net. That web is no longer there. Black needs both rooks on the back rank in order to deliver the mate. So king f7, rook h7 check, and now he pretty much has to take the rook or go to the back rank, where either case it's going to be a promotion with check. And if we go back here, if it goes king to f7, then rook to h7, again the choice is to take the rook and allow a check, or to go back and mate is going to follow here. Okay, so after rook to g8 check, Mark plays king to f7, and now you have to know the follow-up to this as well. Another beautiful move. Again, if you promote, this is still hanging in the air. Can't do that. You have to do it with check. So you go rook to f8 check. Beautiful move. Okay, if you take either rook, the pawn promotes with check. Problem solved. But what after king to g7? What does white do here? Promoting is still going to allow that mate. So what do? You're on the verge of promoting, so the answer is pretty obvious. You play bishop takes f4. You destroy the mating web. And after, if pawn takes, then rook takes pawn, and the mating net is no longer there, and the pawn will promote easy enough. Mark tried bishop takes g3, hoping for bishop takes g3 or f takes g3, obviously. But after king takes g3, he knew that the guy was not going to be snookered, and Mark resigned. Arizona is down to 1/2 point out of 2 games. Let's take a look at board 3. Here we have Robbie Adamson playing white against, Robbie is an IM elect, and he's rated 2396, and he's playing IM Vitaly Niemer. Vitaly is rated 2455. Let's get through this one as quickly as we can. Alright, an odd Caro-Kann. But this is pretty much the normal way to handle this line. And castles. Now, Robbie should either continue with bishop e2 or c3 to make that bishop bite on granite. But he tries bishop to h6, which is a novelty, and it is not a good novelty. But black missed the opportunity to take advantage of this. I think the best move here, which was not played, was bishop takes b2. And these are always difficult to try and figure out in your head who stands better at the end, but I think you'll agree that after these trades that the black is standing better. He's got a better pawn structure. He's got free and easy development of his pieces. He really does. It may look a little clumsy with that pawn being on d5, but the bishop's going to come out easy enough, and the knight will find a good home. On actually, if he can get to d6, that would be optimal. But I like black here, though black's just probably realistically only a tiny bit better. But that is the fault of playing bishop h6 here. But in the game, rook to e8 was played. Now c3, and we're going to go through this part here. Now, this knight, if the bishop retreats back to c8, this knight is just biting on granite. It can't get to f5 or to h5. So when we're back in this position here, that's why I thought knight to g5, rerouting the knight to f3 was a better idea. But this works out good for Robbie because his opponent plays e6. Well, now the knight has something to do. Bye-bye, bishop. And now he castles long, knight to d7 and g4. I was very happy with Robbie's position at this point. Very happy indeed. Now, Vitaly should play f takes g4 here, and after h takes g4, well, let's put it on the board. Now knight f6, bishop c4. I think this is good for white, but it's not as good as the line that is played in the game. Here, Vitaly played knight f6 right away, and Robbie, for some reason, decided not to open up the position. He played f3, and this is not really a Robbie move. Robbie is a very aggressive player, and I thought for sure he was going to play g takes f5. He spent quite a bit of time, I mean not a whole lot, but he spent a good deal of time looking at this position here. And I think he was worried about the knight coming into e4. I don't think that that's a valid concern. Let's take a look. Knight e4, queen c2. Okay, we're hitting the knight, so he's got to do something. He can defend it with pawn takes on f5. This opens up his king, allowing rook to g1, king h8, now bishop e3. Just a simple move. Rook a d8, bishop g2, going after the knight this way as well. So I think that white is doing quite well here. I'd say that white has a clear advantage. He's got the bishop pair. He may trade off that bishop pair if he's going to be able to get at the black king. That's his luxury. I think white is clearly better here. But Robbie played f3 instead. And after rook a d8, I think things are getting pretty equal here. Bishop c4, queen a5, and now f4. Now, I don't understand this at all. If a couple moves ago he didn't want the knight to e4, why is he playing this now? I think that aliens have abducted Robbie's body or something, because Robbie is not one to shy away from tactics. And rook he1 just seems like something that plays right into his wheelhouse. You know, b5, okay, you got to be thinking about this, but look at these tactical complications that can come up in this line. You can play bishop to g5 here. And the point here is if b takes c4, then we go here. And you can look at this, you can get this position from the PGN viewer on the blog and look at it in more detail, but in all variations, white's doing very well. Not winning, but definitely has a very good pull in the position. So here after bishop g5, I think black's best is to play h6. But now he plays rook takes e5 anyhow. And h takes g5, rook takes e8, knight takes, bishop b3, c4, bishop c2, and f4. And I think there's play for both sides, but I think I'd prefer white here. You know, he's always going to have possibilities of sacrifices and stuff, playing the queen to d4, to e5, and going after the g-pawn. You know, a lot of things for white. He can play h4, he can probably play h4 right away. A lot of options for white here. But Robbie played f4, which does allow knight to e4. Now this knight becomes a very prominent piece in the game. Okay, Robbie plays queen to c2, doesn't want his queen taken. And now I think that Vitaly missed a shot here. I think he could have played bishop takes c3. And I think this sacrifice gives him a very good advantage. Say after g takes f5, bishop d4, fg6, hg6. I think black is just better here. And if he takes the bait after bishop takes c3 with b takes c3, then b5. And the point is, if bishop to b3, c4 is looking pretty good for black after bishop to g5, rook to d6, gf5, cb3, queen b3, knight takes c3. I think black is just winning here. And instead of bishop to b3, if bishop takes b5, queen takes b5, rook he1, rook to b8. Again, things look very nice for black, as white's castle position is now shattered to pieces. Black seems to be clearly better here, though it'd be a bit of a stretch to say that black is full out winning. It's not an easy position for white to play, and his bishop on h6 is looking kind of stupid with that pawn sitting there on f4. However, Vitali did not see that, and he played bishop f6, g takes f5, and b5. Bishop d3, and now a blunder by Vitali. He should play knight takes c3. And after bc3, bishop c3, fg6, hg6, f5, we have sharp play. Black is a piece down, but he's got a lot of pressure on the white king. But in the game he played b4, which is a losing mistake. Bishop takes e4. White is up a piece. And here he plays b takes c3, which is another mistake. Queen takes a2, though, doesn't get him out of the fire too much. He can play fg6, hg6, or hg1. Pawn takes on c3, queen a3, and now white can play king to d2. And he's guarding the c3 pawn, and he's going to be looking for further exchanges because white is up a full piece. White is winning. In the game, though, b takes c3 was played, and now Robbie returns the favor. White is completely winning here. I swear, aliens have taken over Robbie's body. Or he met Glenn Quagmire and he ended up getting a rupee colada. One of the two. Something happened. I don't know why he did not play f takes g6 here. Robbie plays rook he1, and this loses the game. Let's go back. The move to play here is f takes g6. And black's position is just shattered. He's got several choices here. Now, this is a very complicated position. And again, you can look at the blog PGN viewer to get all the variations if we go a little too fast on them here. But we can take them one by one. Queen to b5. The idea is to be flexible and be able to come back for defense if needed. Pawn takes on f7, king takes f7, and b3. Okay, white has nothing to fear in this position. He's a pawn and a piece up. Good times. Alright, after f takes g6, you can try c takes b2, trying to be very offensive minded. King slides over, pawn takes on g6. Now bishop takes, and we can clearly see that if pawn takes, queen takes, king to h8, queen takes f6, and we're going to have mate on g7 next. So that's easy enough. So queen to c7. And I think that maybe Robbie missed this little move here. It's a simple move. It looks like it doesn't have anything to do with the attack, but it's d6. And this really throws a monkey wrench into black's defenses. If queen to d7 and bishop f5 gets the threatened bishop out of the way, hits the queen, and opens up the g-file for a lot of fun and adventure. If queen to b7, then rook hg1, king h8, queen f5, and black is busted 6 ways to Sunday. And lastly, if rook takes d6, then we have bishop takes f7, check. Beautiful in-between move. And black has some problems here. If king takes f7, then we get this kind of stuff going on. And if he goes to e6, he gets mated this way. And if he goes to g7, he gets mated in a different way. Mate. Alright, so king takes f7 does not work. Queen takes f7, rook hg1, followed by rook takes d6 with an easy win, a rook up. And if king h8, bishop takes e8, just picked off a rook, and we have a rook and a bishop, and that's too much material for black to come back from. Okay, so that was on c takes b2. Next we can look at queen takes a2. Then we go pawn takes on h7, check, king h8, b takes c3. Doesn't want to trade queens, but now again, we have the move king to d2 here. Everything is protected just fine for white. He's up 2 pawns and a piece. And if f takes g6, does this make any difference? No, not really. The idea is rook to e7 to defend, but then we just go simply bishop to d3, And remember, white is up a piece already. So this is an easy win for white. And lastly, h takes g6 is met by bishop takes, rook to e7. Same kind of defensive idea. But here we go, rook h to g1, queen takes a2. Alright, this is a pretty position here. White probably has several ways to win. What is the prettiest that you can come up with? Pause the video and see what you can find here. Okay, it's just I'm trying to get you to find something pretty to win. There's a lot of ways to win probably, but I think the prettiest move here is queen takes c3. Isn't that just adorable? It's just, I'm gonna take your bishop with my queen, and if you check me, it does you no good, because I'm going to play bishop b1, blocking your check on a1 and giving check with the rook on g1. And that is also the fault with bishop takes queen. You get this. And we've traded queens, and it's an easy win for white, a piece and a pawn up. So f takes g6, queen takes f6, queen a1, but the checks are going to run out after queen c3. Black is toast. He's down a piece and a pawn still. So some very, very pretty stuff, very tactical stuff, and very complicated stuff was in there. He didn't even try for it. I don't know. This is not Robbie. This is not the guy I know. I know he's a sharp player. And why he missed this, I can only assume it was time pressure, but he played rook h to e1, and now he's lost. Why has he lost? Because of rook to b8. And the problem is that black can infiltrate with just about everything with winning force. He's got his rook bearing down, the queen bearing down, the pawn on c3 bearing down, the bishop on f6 bearing down, and the other rook is able to sacrifice on e4 for offensive purposes at the whim. So now Robbie's only opportunity is to muddy waters with d6. But this doesn't work. After rook takes, queen takes, pawn takes, king b1, black is clearly winning here. This is just going to be a matter of technique. In the line played, he played bishop to g5, and after bishop takes, he tries b3. Alright, so he gave back the piece so that he could try and afford some defenses here, but now c4 just comes crashing through. It's just too much for white to handle. Robbie plays f takes g6, and it turns out that white's king position is more vulnerable than black's after c takes b3. Pawn takes on f7 is check, king takes, queen to e2, queen a3 check, only one move. Well, he could play queen to b2 and allow queen takes b2 mate. And now c2, and Robbie resigned at this point. Instead of resigning, he could have played king to b1, allowing the pretty b2 mate. Otherwise, he'd have to give up his queen, so that's why he resigned, as it's just futile. And mate. Yeah, something strange on board 3 there. I don't know what's going on. Alright, that's it. We're down 2 losses and 1 draw. Let's pop over to board 4 and see what happened there. This is the game between Jacob Wilkins for St. Louis. He's rated 1909, and Brian Hugh, who is rated 2255. So Brian, by all rights, should have won this game, but Jacob played a solid game and didn't let him get a big advantage. And we'll go through the opening very quick because that is not really the important part of this game. Alright, Brian's got a little bit of expansion on the queen side here. But here, he took a long think. And I think that came back to bite him later on in the game. Now, while he was thinking, everybody was proposing their ideas, and Brian came up with the right answer. He played queen to a6, which is really the best move. But everybody was going, oh, he could win the a-pawn, or win back the a-pawn, or he could win the d-pawn. I was suggesting rook takes a5 and just doubling on the a-file, but there is a bit of a problem in that move. If rook takes a5, white flicks in knight to d2, there is only one square for the queen, a6. And now you see it. Knight to b3 wins the exchange. Wow. So I'm glad he didn't listen to my advice. A friend of mine was suggesting bishop takes f3, feeling that we could win the d pawn. But the problem here is that white captures with the pawn, and taking on d4 is severely punished by knight to e4. The problem here is that the queen is hit by the bishop on b2, and the queen cannot get to any square that protects the bishop on d6, which is hanging. So this loses. But these were pretty clear things when you're focused on the game, and why Brian took so long on playing queen to a6, I don't know. Maybe he was trying to get a feel for what was happening on the other boards to see what was required of him. But queen a6 is the only move, really. It's sad that you go out there, you're all proud, you know, I'm invading, and then you go, oh, I don't got anything. All right, so e3 was now played, and now queen takes a5, getting the pawn back. Knight to d2, a little bit more positioning here, and we're not going to discuss it too deeply until we get to critical positions. All right, knight to c5 was a bit of an error, and knight to d2 was a simple, solid move to play here. And now Brian should play knight c4, and I think he has a slight edge after either rook ec1, bishop takes c5, dc5, queen c5. This is clearly good for black. Or knight to b3, h6, rook ec1, knight to d6. And I think black has a pleasant edge here. Nothing winning, but a nice edge, a good pull in the game. Instead, he played bishop takes c5, d takes c5, knight c4, and now knight to d1. And now I became a bit confused after Brian's next move. I think knight takes b2 here keeps a slight edge for black, but the move he plays, he trades his bishop for that knight on d1. And then he decides to trade all the minor pieces except for a bishop versus knight. And now, I think he didn't understand what was going on in this position, and he played knight to d7. In order to play knight to d7, you have to preface it with the move rook to e7, and we'll see why. Because after this move, I was looking at the board and go, white's going to play e4, and he's equalized at the very worst. And he played it real quick. And now d4 would maintain equality. Brian pressed forward with knight to c5, and this is putting the score of the game in jeopardy. E takes d5, and now he plays knight takes a4, and this is what he was thinking. I'm getting everything over here, but you know what? This should lose. It's probably better to play c takes d5, a5, rook e to c8, and white's got a nice position here. But after knight takes a4, white returns the favor and plays queen to c2. But do you see what white should play here? It's not entirely clear cut, but it gets to a better position for white after queen to b4. Now, if b5, obviously we just take here with a better game for white. So c5, queen h4, queen to a6, because we've got to get that queen from out of that pin. Now d6 is a nice move. It opens up that bishop guarding the c6 square, so black can't move the queen there, but he can try queen to b5, and now we get d7, e d8, queen to e7, rook a b8, and rook a b1, and this is just winning for white. So after d6, black has to try something like c4, bishop d5, rook a d8, and bishop takes c4. And though the pawns are equal, black is under the gun here. I think white has a winning endgame. There's always the threat of rook takes a4, and if queen takes a4, then bishop takes f7 check. A whole lot of advantages for white in this position. But that was missed. Both players were in mutual time pressure at this point. C takes d5 was played. It was better to play queen to c5. And then after the trades, we have an obvious draw here. You play c takes d5. White misses a clear win at this point with rook takes d5. He played bishop takes d5, but rook takes d5. Let's look at that. Why am I saying it's a clear win? Well, we're threatening to dogpile on that knight, so black has to work on getting out of that right away. Now the point here is if bishop f1, which is going to come to b4 and fork the knight and the rook, queen to c6 nullifies that. So instead of bishop f1 right away, queen to d1, now that threat is renewed. For example, if g6, then we get bishop f1, knight c3, and then we get all these trades going on, and black is down a piece for a pawn. And here, instead of g6, if he tries b5 to avoid that bishop f1 stuff, then simply rook to d6 is hitting the queen, and the rook on a8 is hanging to the bishop on g2. Alright, so he overlooked those little nuances and played bishop takes d5 here. And queen takes c5. And now someone in the chat room said, does bishop takes f7 work? Well, it does for a draw, and that's what was played in the game. But if white wanted to try for a win, he certainly could continue on with queen to b3. And now knight to c3 seems to be the best shot. He gets the pawn anyhow, and rook takes a8, rook takes, and queen takes b7. He picks up another pawn. So white is a pawn up. It may not be enough to win, but the fact of the matter is that white didn't need to win this game. By this point, boards 2 and 3 had already collapsed for Arizona, and a draw was just fine, and so the game continued out like this. And both kings get up to the pawn, and it is a clear draw. And the players agreed to a draw at this point, giving St. Louis a much-needed victory, 3-1 over Arizona. Okay, so next up for Arizona is another interdivisional matchup. They're going to play the the Connecticut Dreadnoughts. On board 1, we're going to have Mackenzie Molnar playing Michael Rode, and I believe Mac's going to be white in that. On board 2, we're going to have Lev Altunian with black against Justin Sakar. Justin's rated 25-12, by the way. Lev is 25-13, so he's a 1-point favorite, but he has the black pieces. On board 3, we're going to see Mark Ginsburg again, but now he's going to be on board 3, not 2, and he's going to go against FIDE Master Leif Pressman. Leif is rated 23-74, and then we have on board 4, Ben Marmot with black against Zachary Tannenbaum, who is rated 21-43. Now here's my breakdown on this. I think Mac is going to win on board 1 this time. I'm sure he's hankering to get a victory. I don't think he's got a victory yet this year. So I think Mac is going to take board 1. Lev, don't hit me. I think Lev's going to have a draw because he has black against a decent player. I don't know too much about Sarkar, but at 25-12, he can't be a pushover. Lev has been playing very sharply, though. Chances are good he could win, but I'm going to call it a draw. On board 3, we have Mark with white against Pressman. I actually am going to call that for Mark. And on board 4, Ben Marmot at 22-01 is going to have the black pieces against Zachary Tannenbaum. It could be a pretty good rollover for Arizona. I give Ben good chances on that, but I'm going to call it a draw because I think that with Mac and Mark, I think they're going to do well, and I think that'll be what Arizona needs. And in this case, board 4 would be okay to be a draw. Lev, I think, is going to be at the worst a draw for Arizona. But we'll see. Strange things happen. Now, they need to score this next point in order to stay in the running. And every match that they got, they need to score. And I think that they're going to come down to where it's pressure points, where you might have board 4 going into a slightly better position, and in order to make the playoffs, he's going to have to start thinking about a win. So we're already in that position here, folks. So Arizona will be taking on the Connecticut Dreadnoughts on October 8th. That's a Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So tune in for that at chess.com. It's free. You can also check out the Scorpions blog below. And you can look at the PGN viewers below to and get a more detailed look at the games instead of having it spelled out to you in a video here. Alright folks, I appreciate you staying tuned for this, and for those of you who are helping to support Arizona Scorpions, thank you very much. These guys are really good people. It's a tough season for them for many things outside of chess. You know, they're not doing too badly. They could be doing better. Alright, that's it for this video, folks. Thank you, and tune in next week for more information on the US Chess League. Until next time, good luck.